Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today I'm gonna share a video that I and my friend dedicate for our assignment. Okay, before I start my presentation, let me introduce myself. My name is Khoirunnisa, and there's my friend Lestari that you will see after my presentation. So today's topic, I'm gonna talk about an article by Marine Celce-Murcia. She's a professor emerita of applied linguistics and ESL at the University of California and Los Angeles, where she taught and mentored graduate students for 30 years. So, in the middle 1990s, Professor Murcia had many discussions with her colleagues concerning the role of communicative competence in language teaching and applied linguistics, and it resulted to publication in 1995. But in the late 1990s, Professor Murcia revised her previous work. So actually, this article is about her revised on her previous work. Before I present you about Professor Murcia's ideas deeply, let's see the revolution of the term communicative competence. So it is actually started by Himes, who responded to the linguistic Chomsky. Himes added sociolinguistic competence in the communicative competence, and then in 1980, Canale and Swain added strategic competence, and they referred linguistic competence as grammatical competence. And a few years later, Canale added discourse competence, and last, in the middle 19th, Professor Celce-Murcia proposed actional competence. So, these authors made two changes in the terminology. Number one, that sociolinguistic competence be modified to sociocultural competence, the cultural background knowledge needed to interpret and use a language effectively. And second is that grammatical competence be relabeled as linguistic competence to explicitly include the sound system and the lexicon as well as the grammar. And let's move on. So, as you can see the picture on my PPT, it's Professor Murcia's contribution that she first proposed. There's a pyramid enclosing a circles on that picture, and there are 3 points of the triangle. The top up is sociocultural competence, and the bottom down is linguistic competence and actional competence. The arrows indicate the various components are constantly interacting with each other, and also the discourse component. This construct placed the discourse component in a central position where the lexical grammatical resources, the actional organizing skills, the social-cultural context all come together and shape the discourse. The circle surrounding the pyramid is strategic competence, an available inventory of communicative, cognitive, and metacognitive strategies that allow a skilled interlocutor to negotiate meanings, resolve ambiguities, and to compensate for deficiencies in any of the other competencies. Then the second picture is the revised model of the previous work by Professor Marcia. Let's dive in to each competence. Number one is sociocultural competence. Sociocultural competence refers to the speaker's pragmatic knowledge. Celce-Murcia et al. Describes several social cultural variables, and three of which are most crucial in the terms of the current model. That is social contextual factors, the participant's age, gender, status, social distance, and their relation to each other. And then also stylistic appropriateness, politeness, strategies, a sense of genre and registers. And last is cultural factors, the background knowledge of the target language, group, major dialects, regional differences, and cross-cultural awareness. So, how to obtain this competence? You can obtain the competence by learning the life tradition, knowledge of literature, knowledge of history, and also knowledge of literature of the target language. And next to the second competence, which is discourse competence, it refers to the selection, sequencing, and arrangement of words, structures, and utterance to achieve a unified spoken message. This is where the top-down communicative intent and sociocultural knowledge intersect with the lexical and grammatical resources to express messages and attitudes and then to create coherent text. Celce-Murcia et al. Divides this discourse competence into cohesion, deixis, spatial coherence, and generic structure. Next to the linguistic competence, it's talk about phonological, includes segmental, it's about vowels, consonants, syllable types, and suprasegmental, like prominence, stress, intonation, and rhythm. It is also talk about lexical, morphological, syntactic, formulaic competence. It refers to those fixed and prefabricated chunks of language that speakers use heavily in everyday interaction. It's about routines like a fixed phrase like of course, all of the sudden, and formulaic chunks. And then also there's also collocation like verb object, spend money, play the piano, and so on. And it's also about idioms that you have already known, like to kick the bucket. It's not explicitly that someone kick a bucket, but there's another meaning. And then interactional competence, there are three subcomponents relevant to the current models. Number one is actional competence, knowledge how to perform common speech, and then conversational competence inherent to turn-taking system. Last competence is strategy competence. It has three fields: cognitive, metacognitive, and memory related. Cognitive means making use of logic and analysis to help oneself learn a new language. And second is metacognitive. It's about planning one's learning by making time for homework and engaging self-evaluation. And last field is memory related. It helps learners recall and retrieve words. Okay, that's all my presentation. You can go to the next presentation with my partner.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Lestari. Today I'll explain about the model implies for language teaching. So based on the revised model that I have described by my friend, it suggests teachers to create and design a language course that aim at giving learners the knowledge and skills they need. Basically, the course should make students to be linguistically and culturally competent in a second or foreign language. So there are 5 principles for the design and implementation of language courses. Number 1 is culture, and then discourse and context. Number 3, balancing of language as system and language as formula, and then focus on dynamic aspects of interaction. And the last is focus on strategies from time to time. Number 1 is the importance of culture. So language instruction must be integrated with cultural and cross-cultural interaction, including general knowledge of literature and arts, the social structure of the culture, and political and educational systems. General knowledge of the literature and other arts that are integral to the target culture should be part of language interaction as basic knowledge of the history and geography associated with the target language community. The social structure of the culture should be covered, especially if the target culture differs in important ways from the learner's culture. And political and educational systems should be introduced as the major religions and holidays, celebrations, and important customs. So number 2 is the importance of discourse and context. Language instructors should provide contextualized and meaningful materials to learners. For example, teachers use some type of real-world discourse, including a story, a dialogue or conversation, and a cartoon strip. And then the goal of language teaching is students are able to interpret and produce meaningful discourse. Therefore, the learning activities should include authentic talks. Number 3 is the need to balance language as system and language as formula. In traditional classroom, language instruction focuses on language as system, and learners should master the grammar and pronunciation of the target language. However, a communicative focus on mastering of many set phrases and other formulaic elements of language. But the challenge in this classroom is to maintain a balance between language as system and language as formula. Mastering only vocabulary and phrases for speech acts without appropriate knowledge of and focus on grammar and pronunciation will result in fluent but inaccurate and therefore limited oral competence. And mastering only grammar and phonology results in linguistically accurate but socially dysfunctional oral communication. That's why the systemic, formulaic, and interactional aspects of language must all be addressed in effective language instruction. And the next is the need to focus on dynamic aspects of interaction. A language course with communicative competence should help students to practice the dynamic nature of interaction in their target language. The rhythm, the intonation, the body, the eye movement, and other aspects of face-to-face communication must be practiced in pairs and small groups. Teachers and learners need to have access to video tapes or film clips. They can be used in many ways to sensitize learners to target language use. For example, watch the segment without sound to observe, describe, and imitate nonverbal behaviors, and listen to the segment sound only to focus on the language as well as grammar and vocabulary. And the last is watch and listen to the intake segment several times in order to role play the segment or to perform a similar interaction. And the last is the need to focus on strategies from time to time. According to Oxford research, learners who make effective use of a range of language strategies learn more and learn faster than learners who don't use a variety of language teaching strategies. That's why teachers should integrate some strategy training and some discussion of strategies into their language classes. When teaching vocabulary, students can memorize words and phrases. And when teaching reading, students can guess the meaning of words in context can be discussed. So here we move to conclusion. There are 2 points that I can conclude from this article. So the first one is communicative competence consists of sociocultural competence, discourse competence, linguistic competence, formulaic competence, interactional competence, and strategic competence. And then content of language course with communicative competence regarding culture, discourse, and context, balancing of language as system and language as formula, focus on dynamic aspects of interaction, and the last is focus on strategies from time to time. Okay, that's all our presentation. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.